I am Troy Anderson. As introduced, I'm going to spend a little bit of time kind of going through the last 5 years of KnowledgePlex harmonizing free data to the people. And what exactly does that mean? Well, first, the way you free harmonize data to the people, let's break it down a little bit. We'll start with the people. So who are the people in your neighborhood? And who better to ask than Fred Rogers? And actually, if we went to YouTube today and tried to click on things, you would see that Mr. Rogers would take us to a neighborhood and to a place that was kind of like Google Earth. You would kind of pan in from outer space, and you'd have all this cool ortho imagery, and then all of a sudden you would end up kind of at his home. And so it kind of goes from this ortho imagery to street view very naturally and seamlessly using very old technology, namely a miniature model of a town. But when you get finally to his home and he takes off his sweater and takes off his shoes and all that sort of thing, you find out that this whole thing about Mr. Rogers' home is important because his home is in a neighborhood. And I think it's important to talk about home and what that means. And if you're like most Americans, home means you go home and you do laundry, and you have a mess at your kitchen table, and you go to bed. And I think that's an important thing to remember when I'm coming in and talking at Google, because a lot of these things you do here at work. So with regard to your actual home, your home is a very important place, not just on the outside, but on the inside. But for this presentation, we're going to focus on how no man is really an island. And it's important that the home is inside a community, inside of a neighborhood. And so let's talk a little bit more about that. How do these communities matter? Well, one way they matter is with regard to the price. Obviously, if you have a nice house and it's in Palo Alto, it makes a big difference than if it's in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska. The other thing about your neighbors is there's neighbors, right? So you can get to know them. There's other services if you're in a neighborhood, like hopefully ones you never have to use. There are some that you'll use all the time. There's some that you'll just borrow on occasion. And there's other odd combos, like the combo between infrastructure and entertainment. The idea is that neighborhoods can make you, feel very cool. You can live in Noe Valley, or they can make you feel very boring, or actually they can make you feel quite destitute. And the point of all this, of course, is that homes are homier when homes feel at home. And what does that mean? That means, again, if you go back, kind of what are the two questions here? Well, they're embedded in this: who are the people in your neighborhood? So who are those people in the neighborhood that are delivering your pizza or taking care of your infrastructure or that sort of thing? So if you look at the map here, you have Woodside, Atherton, and Menlo Park, and the people providing you these services are probably not the same people living in that neighborhood. You know, the policeman and the school teacher and that sort of thing probably can't afford to live in your neighborhood. In fact, there's probably even a barrier in between these two neighborhoods of where people have their homes and where the people providing services to them are. And that's an important factor. And while it's unlikely that East Palo Alto will go under in kind of this ghost town mentality, there are actually communities that do go under in the United States. So there's empty malls, there's dead malls, there's a whole society devoted to this. There's blight, and then likewise, when you have these sort of situations, the people become more destitute. And whether they become homeless or something really drastic, you probably can't see this thing, but it says for this particular census tract that's being targeted here, the average commute time for people living in that tract is 135 minutes to work. So that's 270 minutes round trip, average for people in this community, because it takes a while to drive to Los Angeles. So it's important to realize that when neighborhoods fail, or when communities fail, or even when they're good and they're by Edwards Air Force Base, there's all sorts of things that happen. And the strange part about this is that this is the world we live in, where there's not even one county in the country where a household full of full-time minimum wage earners can afford a one-bedroom apartment. And this is from a partner organization of our Home for Working Families. So who is responsible for this? Well, there's the city and there's the county. Are they really responsible though? There's the governor, essentially government has some responsibility to make these communities a better place. And as Hillary Clinton told us about a child, it takes a village to raise a child, but it takes an even bigger village to raise a neighborhood. And so when you're at a neighborhood level, what are the groups that are really around this? It's not just the government, and probably unbeknownst to many of you, there's a myriad of organizations that support communities, like Homes for Working Families. But likewise, there's a number of others. So all these organizations are geared around how do we make these communities a better place? And likewise, there's a number of foundations. I didn't put Google Org up there, but you get a sense that there are organizations, whether nationally or even locally, as Marvin Memorial Trust does, that have great people, and they're also significantly invested in making these things work. But it's still not enough. So let's get to the part of the free harmonized data to the people. And what does that mean? So in September of 1999, the Fannie Mae Foundation was doing some research. And for me, I remember back from my childhood that this was an inauspicious time, because that was the time when the Earth was going to jettison out of the Earth's orbit and go into space and have all sorts of adventures. But in fact, that's not what happened. So the Fannie Mae Foundation, when Stacy Stewart came to the foundation, she and Peter Beard, my former boss at the Fannie Mae Foundation, went to these organizations and said, how can we be more help to people? Single grants don't scale. So you can provide a lot of grants, but after $1 million or $100 million, you can't help everybody. And so how do you do something that would scale? And so the results of doing this research with those various partners was that there were 3 things that needed to be done. One was you need to help stop the reinvention of the wheel. So don't have something that goes on in Dallas, be some new project that someone starts up, and then have that same project go on in Seattle when they could have just borrowed from the project in Dallas. Level the playing field. There's all sorts of people doing all sorts of investment in communities that aren't community-minded. So corporations and that sort of thing, payday lenders and that sort of thing, all have various data and information that they can get about these communities that the own communities cannot get because they can pay for it. And then likewise, disseminate expertise. And what that means is, there's all sorts of experts around community issues and community development issues. How do you make this expertise get out to the people who really need it? Well, so in 2001, they launched KnowledgePlex, which is an affordable housing and community development vertical portal, which was really a one-stop shop with news, information, and that sort of thing to really try and accomplish those 3 goals. The so what, wasn't to serve man per se, but really to help the practitioners in the field, the people that are really doing the job on the ground, and likewise the policymakers that are supporting these communities as well, the researchers and scholars that are around that, and then likewise the press who's reporting on these conditions. So all these people need to be served, and KnowledgePlex was a way of serving them. So it's this online vertical portal that's still around today. So if you go to knowledgeplex.org, you can actually see what we're talking about. And of course, one of the things that happened at the Fannie Mae Foundation is that when they first launched this project, they didn't really have any technologists. So in 2003, Stacy and Peter went out and they tried to search high and low for people to do this sort of development for them. And of course, they satisfied with some, people from bankrupt companies from Silicon Valley. And so essentially what they did is they said, okay, we've brought you guys on from Silicon Valley. Now, how can you make these things better? We want to be bigger, stronger, faster. And so, we want to build a website that will respond to this audience and really get this stuff done. And so when the audience said make it simpler, we made it simpler. When they said show me what's relevant, we did that and we made it relevant. And likewise, we organized all these kind of semantics around different topics in this space of community development. Make it work for me, that is, I don't want to have to do a lot of work about this. So we provided industry-wide calendars and other industry-wide things. And likewise, tell me what's important. So we'll summarize the week's news and send it out as a newsletter. And so that's still going on until today. Well, the other thing that they wanted as far as the dissemination of expertise is these expert chats. So we hold regular chats with people in the field so that they can talk to people, whether they're in some podunk place, or if they're in a big city, or if they're in some suburb, they can come to KnowledgePlex and they can find out about healthy housing and healthy families. And these are all archived at KnowledgePlex as well. So we gave them all that, right? And of course, what did they say? They said, we want more, right? It's, I don't know what that is, human condition. And I'm like, well, what are we, the giving tree? And in fact, we were, because it's Fannie Mae Foundation. And so Fannie Mae Foundation, the mission is to give everything away. And so that we did exactly that. And so what we did, what we had to do, was to rebuild KnowledgePlex. And we did it without the messy and costly licenses, so that we could syndicate not only this content to our own site, but to partner websites. And they became like technology grants. So we're providing content out in a variety of different means. So when we were approached by Harvard University's Ashton Institute at the Kennedy School of Government, very long title, they said, we want a KnowledgePlex for innovations in the public governance. We said, okay, cool. We have this LAMP architecture, and we can essentially repurpose these tools for you so that we could take the shell of KnowledgePlex and make it work for you. So this is a completely different content area. This is not about community development or affordable housing. This is essentially about innovations in the public governance. So if you go to innovations.harvard.edu, you can find the site, and it's being served off of KnowledgePlex. And of course, these technology grants became in vogue, and so we did a couple of others. But as we started to review our list of are we accomplishing the goals that the foundation had set out for us, don't reinvent the wheel, level the playing field, disseminate expertise, it was yes, yes, and yes. And not only that, but when they said, can we do more? Well, of course, we complied. And that's the thing about community development, is that there's always more to do. So the next part is the free and the data. So far we've talked about people and let's talk about free and data. So we got some feedback on doing this KnowledgePlex project. And it was great very broadly. It's kind of the national topics about national news, and we brought in the LexisNexis feed, and we're serving it up to this audience all about the affordable housing issues. But it wasn't so great locally. And that's understandable. We don't have editors in every city covering every topic that's going on a local basis. So what we did at the foundation, who is also getting bombarded by a number of grant requests for geographic information systems, and a lot of these grant requests from grantees to the Fannie Mae Foundation, they want to buy an ESRI license and hire GIS engineers and buy some data and put it all on Oracle. And you didn't have to ask Morpheus how deep the rabbit hole went. GIS is very expensive, right? And so we had these two things. One, we're not serving things locally, and GIS is very expensive. And strangely, every grantee wanted to buy the cow. It's not like the answers were actually free, right? I mean, these answers are actually free, or weren't they? So if you look at these organizations and you look at them online now, Census, Home Mortgage Disclosure Act, IRS, and HUD are providing data free of charge to people in the world. And they invest billions. And likewise, they have brilliant people working on these things. And they really care about getting this data out there. But nonetheless, until you kind of cross that last mile, is it really free? So the following representations show how free the data is. And and this is just by way of example. Please tell me where black should play. Anyone? This is from the blood vomiting game, the ear-reddening move game. This is from the Master of Go. And this is a game of Cicada Eos. So it's obviously quite obvious, what to do in these sort of situations. And it was likewise obvious on the data side. So you have this data, and it's really easy to use when you can deal with, code race combinations and code gender combinations and create flags for high costs, et cetera. You code the purpose to be consistent with 2004, create base files, add places, codes based on majority tract, add standards for MSA, recode back to the server, and for good measure, don't forget to QA and do it all in SAS. And then you can crow to your friends about how free this data really is. And that's really the point, is while, the source files are free, as long as your time is also free, and get a degree and learn and all that sort of thing, then the data is free. So what does it mean to have free data? So imagine, if you will, how many people in the community development sphere are really good at these sort of things. Well, it's a very small sliver. So we get to our next point, which is how do we harmonize all this sort of thing? So, and we want to enter someone from the foundation who actually had this concept, and that was our director of demography, Patrick Simmons. And so there he is. And he had this vision essentially for meeting grantee needs and meeting KnowledgePlex user needs through a scalable, freely available, and freely workable. So not just free data sets, but also freely workable data sets. And what he needed was a man on the inside who could get things done. And so he went to his Silicon Valley posse there at the Fannie Mae Foundation, and together they created DataPlace. And and this is the time before Google Maps and pre-mashup, and so we really had to do it all by ourselves. And so we did a number of jobs to harmonize the data. One was the data aggregation. So that's just pretty simple. We can bring in all these files from these various sources, but then we have to go through all those processes, right? And so this data cleaning, data normalizing, geographic normalization, and indicator building is not something that the data just do by themselves. And you remember all the steps after the Go boards. That's just a glimpse of basically what we do when we're doing those steps. And so as you go through that, and there's still more. These aren't made up steps, and this is just part of what we're doing. And I was thinking we should have a jackass-like warning for people that are trying to do this. And we haven't put that on the site yet. But the idea is that you should tell people when they try and get after these free data sets, kind of what they're going to get into. Because there's more steps to do, right? So you have those initial steps, and then you have these other steps. You have to have the data exchange, you have to do all the semantics on the geodata, you have to do kind of the internal APIs to do the views, which are in the user interface, and then 10 is, of course, the biggest bucket there is. It's the miscellaneous bucket. So it's essentially 10 businesses that we're doing, and that's all to deliver DataPlace. And so this is DataPlace. You can go to it now. It's www.dataplace.org. And really, it's geared towards making this as simple as possible for people in community development so they really can get at these free data. And so you can just type in ATL and you can get an autocomplete on the search, or you can browse to your geography. You can put in an address and it'll pinpoint for you. We'll do auto summaries, we'll do tables and histograms, which are really cool because if you have a value that's like 0.8%, is that really high or is that really low compared to other places in the US? We did our own maps. There was no Google mashup at the time when we had this idea. And so we've done our own mapping application using all open source tools, among many other various views. And so what we're doing is we're essentially taking these data sets and other data sets that we're getting from like the Brookings Institution, who's now working on a blueprint for American prosperity, and putting these data sets up and putting them in as a layer onto the DataPlace application. And you may be saying, this is Google, right? Why go through the trouble? You little peon non-for-profit, why not just crawl it all? Well, some things crawl really, really well. Others are doing just that or similar, and there are examples of that, where these organizations are actually doing a very good job of taking kind of data that's readable and putting it onto their site. But there are things that don't crawl as well. So we're a quick pop quiz for you all. How many different genders are there? Quick. Raise your hand. Yes, you sir, have an answer? No? Oh, okay. 2. All right. Well, actually, for the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act data, there are 7. And so the data itself has these sort of characteristics to them that you might not expect. And so some of these things are could be taken atomically and repackaged, but there's actually some things in here that actually need some human reading. And that's really what this harmonization is. And I try to figure out what the definition of harmonized was. It's bringing 2 notes together in harmony. And so the 2 notes for us are really data and place. And both change. They are not steady state things. There's things that get reported out of these federal agencies that are fantastic pieces of work that people work really hard to produce. do change over time because people have different things that they want to get out of the data sets at different years. And so they have to be cleaned. And here's some examples. So here we are. I'm logged in as an admin, and I'm going to the DataPlace site, and I want to do some of this QA on some of this data work that we're doing. So I go and I put in LAS, and it brings up the different places that start with LAS in the United States by geography and descending order of population. And I pick the Las Vegas Metro, and I click there, and I go to this area overview of the Las Vegas Metro for a number of relevant statistics that are quick and free, and they've already gone through a lot of processing. Likewise, I can go to the histogram and I can see where the Las Vegas Metro is on particular indicators. So for the percent Hispanic and Latino, it's actually very high compared to other metros in the US. So we're doing comparisons between metros. And likewise, I can rank the metros. So there's 335 in 2000, and Las Vegas was 44. But you see, like, on the far left here, right above the Las Vegas, Nevada Metro is Richland, Kennewick, Pasco. That doesn't seem like a real metro. I mean, it's a real metro when you go there and there's nice people there, but it's not big like Las Vegas or Tucson. So if we go and we set the minimum population to be 1 million, then we see the big metros. So the metros with more than 1 million people. And you can see that Las Vegas has crawled from number 44 up to number 13 for big metros. And this is what we're doing with regard to harmonizing the data. So it's connecting this data to the place and then pivoting around and showing you different views of that same sort of thing. And we do that in a number of different permutations. So, pardon me. What you have here is the list of where we have data and when we have data. So at what granularity do we have this data? Is it at the census tract, or is it at the city, or the zip code, or the county? And then likewise, what years of data do we have in the system currently? Well, how do you find out if something's prime time? And so this is the thing that we're doing when we're checking as an admin. We're going in and we're looking at things like the home ownership rate, and does this look right? But then we can go and look at some of the unpublished data sets. So this is National Center for Education Statistics, and we can plot the schools on the map. And likewise, we can click on a point and we can bring up all the statistics for this particular school in the Las Vegas area. But then when we start to chart the data, we start to notice that there's this very nice line that's going up from 18 to 31% in 2003, and then there's this crash in population in 2004. What happened? This is the percent of public school students that are Hispanic. And actually, if you go and dig a little deeper, you'll see that it's because Clark County did not report their data. Well, how are you going to crawl all this? How are you going to make all this happen? Well, you're not. The point is that people actually have to go and look at these things and account for these things. And while this data set looks pretty close, it's certainly not there. So don't forget the warning. And this is one of my favorite quotes. It's supposed to be hard. If it wasn't hard, everyone would do it. The hard is what makes it great, and this is Tom Hanks's Jimmy Dugan in League of Their Own. And that's exactly the kind of work we do, really hard, labor-intensive, people-intensive work. And why? Well, because we care about communities, and we care about quality. And because we want to get the information into people's hands as soon as possible, but no sooner. But likewise, this leads to a trusted product, a trusted process, and a connection with communities that leads to interesting stories. And where data meets place is really where we want to go. So I'm going to show you some things that you just can't see on DataPlace. There's some new views and some new comparisons. And what we're going to look at here, I'm going to look at the map. I want you to focus on the Washington, D.C. area. So it's this is square, right? And so what you're going to look at is this part of the square. And you can really see that there's two sides of Washington, D.C. There's kind of the haves, and there's the have-nots. And while this data isn't talking about that as much, you can see that there really is this line going up right through Rock Creek Park. And so we're going to focus on this area right here on the right, so try and keep your eye on that as we go through time. So this is 1997, and this is the number of subprime mortgage loans in the Washington, D.C. area. And you can see, in just incrementing 1 year, some of these subprime loans have disappeared. And if you keep going, you'll see that something interesting has happened. By 2004, what used to be green within Washington, D.C. is no longer this dark green color. It's now very light. And all the dark green is kind of out here in the Maryland suburbs. Now, perhaps you didn't see that well, so I've put a little help. which is this yellow line, so that you can actually just see where the dark green is disappearing. And if you look again through time, you can see that it's getting lighter and lighter. Well, the suburban Maryland continues to be dark green. And finally, by 2004, the have-not part of Washington, D.C. kind of looks like the have. Now, the interesting thing is, what is the story? Yes?
I noticed the numbers corresponding to each color are also changing between
yes.
different years.
Let me talk about this. So this is an important thing. So what does this green mean? So as you change this over time, this is reflecting the national octiles of this data set. So dark green means this is high for the entire US. So if you were to take an eighth of the US percentages and you were to apply them, they would get this dark green color. So what's changing is that Washington, D.C. is actually moving out from that eighth octile and moving into the lower octiles as far as percent relative to the rest of all the census tracts in the United States. It's a lot of work, and it's a good question. So, why? Why did this happen in Washington, D.C.? And despite doing these kind of 10 businesses on data prep, going to 11 is tough, as Nigel would have told you in Spinal Tap. This sort of thing of asking the story, why did this happen? And storytellers are really the 11th person in the field, and they're the people that we partner with, and they're the ones who are going to really give you that view of why that happened. And there's a lot of different reasons. Actually, some of the stories I've heard about this is that, the city government should be praised for its great work, or maybe it's just the gentrification of all these poor people having to move out farther and farther out. There's a number of different stories, but what the real story is that we're providing this ammunition for people to tell these stories. So that's what we do. So another new view, which was previewed in our poster, was the dual maps, or dual maps maybe. And so this is the look at this corner of Washington, D.C. Again, this is tract 7808, and that's tract 7808. And so you're looking at 1997 versus 2004. And as the gentleman already pointed out, it's important to know that this is the uppermost octile of data for that particular thing. And those octiles change year to year, but still seeing less of a percent relative to the nation is important. But the other thing you can do is you can link these maps together. And so as you move the map around, you can see them moving in tandem, or you can move them separately. So what I did, just for grins, is compare Washington, D.C. in 1997 to East Palo Alto in 1997. And so you can put these two side by side, and you can increment the time from 1997, and then we can look at it in 1999, and we can see that it's getting a little bit lighter here, but really East Palo hasn't changed. And then in 2001, what is the situation? Again, it's getting a little bit lighter in DC. A lot of the subprime top octile stuff is moving to Maryland, whereas East Palo Alto stay the same. You can see that Menlo Park and Atherton are less green, though. And then finally, in 2004, you can see the situation really has not changed much. So no matter the year, East Palo Alto has maintained this kind of very steady state in the top octiles. Whereas, of course, its neighbors on the other side of 101 have a little bit better situation, with the exception of a little bit that Redwood City, Menlo Park area, whereas Washington, D.C. we saw before. So these are the sort of things that we're providing. So putting it all together, how do you do this free harmonized data to the people? Well, with all these elements in place, I can tell you about the future. And I don't mean guess. So what will the future actually hold? I will tell you what the future will actually hold, is that these data will become available. And how do I know that? Well, I came from StockMaster, which was an online financial stock site. And essentially, I had this enormous sense of deja vu in 1992, where the same sort of thing happened with stocks. And so, it's the same sort of thing happening with stocks. It seems very similar with community data. So in 1992, you had public equities, right? And what are public equities? They're stocks. And what does that mean? It's like stocks like ticker symbols, Google, Microsoft, and Yahoo, or Misthoof, or Foo Smith, or whatever it ends up being. Maybe it's merging with CNET. But anyway, it's companies, and there are company stock prices. And so this selling stock to the public is what this public equities mean. Unfortunately, in 1992, this public data was about as public as the HMDA data was. So unless you were an expert or you paid, you weren't going to get kind of a free equities price. I mean, you could go and pay your stockbroker for this information, or you could dig through the stock pages, right? But unless you accounted for splits and mergers and other stock-changing events, a dollar is not a dollar. So this is the Google stock price over 5 years. And if I told you that the stock price of Google were $100, maybe some of you would jump down the stairwell. But the others of you might not be concerned, because maybe it just means if it's 10 to 1. So as companies do splits and these mergers, all these sort of things are accounted for when you look at public equities data. And in 1993, that's exactly what happened. StockMaster was founded and took this kind of public data, which was really kind of hard to work with, and made it not just freely available, but freely workable. So in the span of 1993 to 2000, you had Yahoo Finance and Big Charts and Quote and MarketWatch and all these other companies that were essentially trying to one-up each other to get this data to be more workable with more information. And so as part of StockMaster, I was really part of this feeding frenzy that the public had for all of this information. And likewise, companies were trying to fulfill it and get their stock prices up. And so the people were fed. And this kind of insatiable appetite I see as kind of this virtuous circle. Whereas the attractiveness to us being in this business, so the attractiveness to web entry, which is that far right thing, makes more availability of the data. It's more attractive to data providers and attractive to data collectors, and therefore it makes it easier for all of us to use, and likewise there's more user demand. And so as you start to do these things, they start to take off. And so this is an increasing returns to information. But likewise, it's increasing returns to transparency. So it's the ride to accountability. As the data is more transparent and more data is used to gauge decisions, and there's more data requests and less opportunity to hide data, you have more accountability. So as these things become more and more public, it's very clear what sort of happens. And so this is something that actually did happen. This is not a fiction. And so the equity analysts before, when things were very hidden from the public view, they could do what they want, they could say what they want, but then later they were guilty. Likewise, Sarbannes Oxley came up as a result of some of this accountability and transparency stuff. Whistleblowers became heroes. They appeared on the cover of magazines. And likewise, you could say that maybe the Google IPO stock price auction was this idea of fairness, right? Instead of giving it to some firm and then jacking up the price at the time of the IPO, you could have this stock price auction. So all these sort of things are when you make things transparent, then accountability happens. So today, when you look at public equities, they're actually, I'm going to actually press the button, they're public equities, right? So now they're really in the free space. And so you can really go and you can look at them, and you can go to any site basically these days and find out all sorts of information about these stock prices. So what is the future? Well, the same thing is going to happen with our data, I'm just sure of it. So with community statistics, it will happen. And I would guess in less than 3 years. I mean, already we're doing it, and we're doing it for a lot of different topics. And as we start to expose people to do it, it's like, oh, can I put my data on there? Or, oh, how do we make it available so we can do it? And then likewise, it's spurring all these competitors who want to, oh, well, we can do the same thing, and we can do it better. And so there's going to be this kind of rat race and feeding frenzy until you get it back into the same sort of picture. Now, what have I done? I've changed the word public equities to community statistics. So really, there's no difference in exactly the sort of things that we're doing now and the same sort of thing that I expect to happen later. So that's how the prediction works, I would say, for the US. Now, the important difference is the US has all this kind of statistics available and very easy to use. Whereas the rest of the world, well, that's not really the rest of the world. The rest of the world doesn't have these statistics as easy to use and not as freely available. So the prediction doesn't really work outside of the US. That will take longer, right? So that's the end of the ball. So I'm going to leave you with this little riddle. You can't crawl it and have it be good. It has to be solved with people, and there's two kinds: data and place preparers and storytellers. Storytellers, and it's who you're solving for. And it'll be here. Don't mistake me. It will be here. If you're ready or not, before 3 years' time in the United States, it will change decision making, and accountability will permeate. And if done right, the world will do it too. So feel free to visit us. We're at knowledgeplex.org, dataplace.org, blog.dataplace.org. And if you want to know what it is, you can come and visit us. Thank you. Questions? Yeah, I can repeat the question otherwise.
I was wondering that one of the glaring pieces of data that is missing there seems to be education about school performances and so on. Have you thought about it and whether you plan to add it to?
Yeah, so as I showed in the demo, we do have the school information available. It's just, it's not quite ready for prime time. And again, here, I will log in and show you. And despite showing you everything in PowerPoint, the site actually does work. Let's see. We have a bunch of engineers here in the audience, and I can hear them shuffling uncomfortably. So this is schools by location, and you have to. So there's thousands of indicators in DataPlace, and so if I want to pick on a particular indicator, you either have to know what it is or you have to find it, and we have semantic ways actually of doing that, which are really cool, but that's a longer presentation. So here are the schools in the U.S. And we can obviously put a lot of more pinpoints than you could on a Google mashup. And let's pick on one of these schools at random. And so for each of these schools, we have this information from the National Center for Education and Statistics, another agency that's doing great work. And so you can get the school address and all that sort of thing, all that long. But likewise, some of these other statistics, like a number of students, student to teacher ratio, which is maybe a corollary with performance. But then as you go to look for the actual performance data by the schools, sometimes it's just not as easy to get. And so this is the first data set that we'll have up, but at some point later, we'll hope to have the education performance as well. Other questions? Yeah.
So I assume the data analysis is being done by your people, right?
Yes.
Are you doing any work on enabling the general public to help with the data analysis? And particularly if any of this is going to scale outside the U.S., you can't do all of that work.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think there are a number of things that we're going to try and enable. And again, just to repeat the question, or to paraphrase it to make sure I got it right, you're asking, when we prepare the data, are we going to make it available for others outside of DataPlace to prepare their data for these views and to make it workable? Or are you saying there's so much other world data that how are you going to solve all the world's problems? Well, one, we're not going to solve them all. Two, we provide a model for how to do it, and so I think that's an important thing. DataPlace is an open source platform, and it's something that we're looking to share. So, with regard to how to prepare the data and how to be good about it, it really does take some subject matter expertise depending on the topic. So if you're talking about environmental data, you want someone who's an environmental expert. If you're talking about housing, you want a housing expert. If you're talking about crime, you want a crime expert. But we can be an example for the rest of the world, I think. I think we're in a good spot almost now with DataPlace once we've added some more topics to the site where we'll be able to actually provide these sort of answers and be a model for others.
Okay, so you're saying all of this software is open source or going to be, so if an organization in Nigeria wanted to make a Nigerian version of DataPlace, they could just do it?
Well, unfortunately, it's not that simple. It's not. We have a number of servers in co-location facility, and to kind of open source DataPlace would take a lot of work. That said, we'd be happy to put in the polygons from Nigeria. We'd be happy to put in the data from Nigeria. We'd be happy to work with them. And obviously, since we're a not-for-profit, it'd be great if they could support us in some way of doing that. But likewise, we've provided the tools on DataPlace to do that for the United States. It's just that we haven't quite opened it up to the rest of the world yet with regard to geographies that we do. But obviously, just as in the KnowledgePlex example, we did a vertical portal on affordable housing, we could do that same kind of co-branding. The bits and bytes don't know where you are. They just need to know the geography. They just need to know the data. And they need to know that's coming in some standardized format so it can be read semantically and all the other cool stuff that I talked about. Other questions? If not, I really appreciate the time. Thank you for the opportunity to present, and feel free to visit us or catch up with us later. All right, thanks.